Hi, it's Katrina. For centuries, the ice has been a silent time capsule trapping whispers of the past. But as our planet warms, these icy tombs are beginning to thaw, releasing extraordinary discoveries. A satellite lost forever in the Arctic, strange artifacts in the Alps that scientists can't explain, and a plague that could be unleashed once more. These are the craziest things that have been found in the ice. A lost Arctic satellite. 1,000 years from now, maybe even 10,000 years from now, someone is going to find the NASA satellite that crashed into the Arctic 20 years ago, and they're going to think it's a UFO. In 2010, a group of undergraduate students got their mittens on the maneuvering thrusters of a NASA satellite. It turns out they weren't very good at steering, though, because they drove the 2,000-pound piece of equipment into the atmosphere. The satellite burned up, sending fragments like hot metal shrapnel across the cold seas north of Norway and Russia. And then the satellite was gone. Oops! Darren Osborne was the flight director of the destroyed piece of tech known as the Ice, Cloud, and Land Elevation Satellite. You can call it ICE-SAT for short. Darren and his team ran calculations to figure out where the spacecraft landed, and it was somewhere deep in the Arctic. What I want to know is who let these graduate students get their hands on such sophisticated equipment in the first place. I guess you have to learn sometime, right? The ICESat had been returning data from space consecutively for 7 years. It was equipped with a specialized laser for measuring ice thickness. The students were given the controls to learn, and they learned the hard way by sending the satellite to a fiery grave. Well, it started fiery, but it ended up cool. The spacecraft is still somewhere in Antarctica, a huge orb of twisted metal. NASA's calculations say that only about 200 pounds of the original 2,000-pound satellite survived the descent to the surface. Mummified beasts of the Ice Age. Out of all the mummified animals you would want to find in the Siberian permafrost, a saber-toothed cat must be at the top of your list, right? Along with a ferocious bear and a woolly mammoth. Now, something even cooler than all three has been found. Someone uncovered the frozen remains of a saber-toothed tiger kitten. A kitten, a little baby. The body is so amazingly preserved, it still has its claws and fur intact. This is one of the most awesome and rarest things discovered in the ice this decade. The kitten is between 31,000 and 35,000 years old, found at the edge of a river in Siberia's Yakutia region. How much would you give to cuddle an extinct saber-toothed kitten? Alive, that is. Remember, the direwolf fans got to. The discovery was not made by scientists, but by scavengers. A group of locals were hunting for mammoth tusks in eastern Siberia when they stumbled upon the unexpected treasure. Imagine stumbling upon this tiny furry assassin frozen in time. Talk about a meow-mentous occasion. It turned out the frosty bundle of fur was a kitten, only 3 weeks old when it died. Manuel J. Salesa from the National Museum of Natural Sciences said this amazing find was one of the most exciting moments of their career. And Manuel wasn't even involved in the study. It's hard to put into words how big of a deal this is. Paleontologists have been praying to every god under the sun for decades for someone to find a frozen saber-toothed cat in the permafrost. And now their prayers have just been answered. This is the first time that an extinct mammal with no analog in the modern world has been studied. Let me break down what that means. Scientists have found a mummified woolly rhinoceros. Plenty of mummified woolly mammoths have been discovered too. There was even a recent finding of a 32,000-year-old wolf head. Mammoths and rhinos and wolves, no matter how woolly they are, all have living analogs that they can be compared to, but not the saber-toothed tiger. It is such a unique beast that nothing alive today even comes close to matching it. If you don't believe me, take a look at this picture from the 2024 scientific reports released by the authors of the study. You can see the paw difference between figures C and D. D is a modern lion's paw, while C is the frozen paw of the saber-toothed cub. You can tell they look different, but you might not be able to see exactly what's missing. The saber-toothed cub has no carpal pads. Carpal pads are common in just about every living cat and dog on the planet. They are used for cushioning their movement, acting like shock absorbers. Scientists speculate the extinct tiger may not have needed them because it had adapted to walking through the snow. And snow is pretty soft, I guess. Even though it's called a tiger, the similarities between, let's say, a saber-toothed cat and a Bengal tiger are very slim. Now that scientists have a real preserved specimen, you can expect more studies being released very soon. They will hopefully give us even more information on what this ferocious predator was like before it vanished from the Earth at the end of the Ice Age. And now for a quick break because it's shout-out time! I want to give a big thank you to David Pendleton and Christine Solen for supporting this channel. We wouldn't be here without you guys. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already for more videos like this. Icy petroglyphs in the mountains. Where do you think the highest and iciest petroglyphs in Europe are? The answer is Italy. A series of petroglyphs have been found in the Alpine Lombardy region at almost 10,000 feet above sea level. A hiker stumbled upon them by accident. Then it took 7 years for archaeologists to strap on their own hiking boots and confirm the discovery. These amazing petroglyphs are so high that they must have been covered by a glacier until a few thousand years ago. The unnamed hiker found them on Pizzo Tresero in the Stelvio National Park at the actual foot of a glacier. Radiocarbon dating analysis revealed the petroglyphs to have been made about 3,600 years ago. Who in the world was scaling a mountain of this size to draw doodles and rock during the Bronze Age? Didn't people have more important things to do, like hunting and gathering and building civilization? This is now the highest graffiti in Europe, but scientists are still trying to figure out what the graffiti represents. After being exposed to the brutal elements on the mountaintop for thousands of years, the images have been worn very badly. There appear to be carvings of human figures, possibly meant as depictions of gods or spirits, or maybe even aliens. Then there are the unusual spiral petroglyphs, and animals that look like they might be ghosts or horses. One of the humanoid figures even has their arms raised towards the sky as if crying out to the heavens. Scientists think these petroglyphs could point to a previously unknown civilization living way up in the mountains where nobody ever thought to look before. Archaeologists typically stick around sea level, to avoid all the dangerous climbing. In other news, the region also happens to be a prehistoric hotspot. A completely unrelated investigation recently found a fossilized ecosystem in the same area from 280 million years ago. Clearly, scientists need to do more investigations on mountaintops or on recently melted glaciers. A secret military base revealed by NASA. What's that? A polar bear? An igloo? Nope, it's a secret base. NASA recently found the remnants of an abandoned U.S. military facility buried underneath the ice. This incredible find revealed a little-known piece of American history. It takes us back to the Cold War and one of the USA's most bizarre plots to become a nuclear superpower. During a spring flight over the Greenland ice sheet, Chad Green was taking radar images of the snowy and cold land below. Chad is a cryospheric scientist with NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory. He was not expecting to see the remains of a secret military base rising from the ice like a forgotten ruin. It didn't take long for Chad to confirm that what he spotted was Camp Century. 65 years ago, the United States, in a move that would make even Wile E. Coyote proud, constructed Camp Century as a military installation 100 feet below the ice sheet. It was supposed to be a self-contained city, as well as, get this, a covert launching facility for nuclear missiles. Let's rewind to when this bizarre project began in June of 1959. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers constructed 9,800 feet of underground tunnels. There were about 21 corridors weaving like a labyrinth beneath the solid ice above, and one main thoroughfare cutting through the middle. It was quite a lot of work because the temperature was, on average, a balmy minus 70 degrees. The winds above the tunnels blasted past at 125 miles per hour. Brr! It took 6,000 tons of material to construct the base. And how do you think they got all those supplies there? The Army used heavy bobsleds that could only move at 2 miles an hour. They had to bring the materials from a different U.S. base 70 hours away. That took forever. This is everything you need to know about how to build your own secret base in the ice. The Army engineers dug some trenches, really big trenches, mind you. Then they built wooden structures inside the trenches and fitted them with stable steel roofs. Once everything was built, they simply needed to cover themselves back over with ice to remain invisible. But how do you have a hot shower in a place like this? Power came from one of the very first nuclear reactors ever used. It was a PM2 medium power reactor that energized the entire site. There were surprising scientific developments thanks to Camp Century. The scientists working at the base were among the first to study ice core samples and the ancient history of Greenland. They realized that millions of years ago, Greenland wasn't icy. It was covered in thick forests and home to diverse wildlife. As great as the scientific studies were, they were also just a front. They were a smokescreen. Camp Century was really part of a major U.S. nuclear weapon strategy. Even the Danish government, who gave the U.S. permission to build the base, didn't know about the nuclear aspect of it. The Army's plan was to house 600 ballistic missiles inside 52,000 square miles of tunnels. That many missiles would have required 60 launch centers and at least 11,000 soldiers living full-time beneath the ice. This last part never happened because it was impossible. There were no ballistic missiles at Camp Century. By 1967, the place was abandoned. What Chad Green recently saw from his airplane were the deserted buildings of the US's most Dr. Evil moment ever. Chad saw the proof that the US Army tried to build a doomsday center in an actual ice sheet. The unidentified frozen object. A UFO found in the Swiss Alps, but it's not what you might think. When Sergio Verdi went for a hike in the Swiss Alps, he never expected to find a bizarre artifact that no one has been able to explain yet. Maybe you can come up with some ideas and let us know in the comments. Sergio went for his hike in the Splugen Pass, a snowy and blustery part of the Alps. While walking, he came across an object, something that looked kind of like a wagon. Upon closer inspection, Sergio discovered it to be a bamboo cart lashed together with rods and cords. It was strewn along the mountain rock of an ancient trail, but the object doesn't seem to be that ancient. Sergio reported his discovery to the local canton of Graubünden Archaeological Services. In a Facebook post, the officials reported that he had discovered a UFO, though not the kind you're thinking. They meant it as an unidentified frozen object. Archaeologists don't know what the thing is. They called it a contraption and said it appears to date to the 20th century. It's only a few decades old. But there are some really weird problems with the cart, or whatever it is. It's made mostly of bamboo, which definitely does not grow locally in Switzerland. The cart has two wheels, which were made by wrapping bamboo poles with cord. It almost looks like a merchant's wagon from the Far East. But how did it get so high up in the Alps? Some have guessed it was used for carrying hunting supplies. Perhaps it was used by a hunter to carry their meat back down the mountain. But then why would they leave the cart up there? Another guess is that the cart was used in a smuggling operation. But again, why is it still on the mountain? It is possible the object is older than archaeologists have guessed. The Splugen Pass was used as a trade route in ancient times. Maybe this device was used by a long-distance trader who got lost in the high mountains of Europe and never found their way out. Do you have any ideas? Let me hear them. An invasion of seeds. There is an alien invasion unfolding in Antarctica right now. But the aliens aren't the kind with antennae and spaceships. These aliens are seeds. Perfectly ordinary seeds from different parts of the world. Antarctica is changing before our very eyes. It's crazy to think the world has progressed to such a level that you can take a vacation to Antarctica. It wasn't that long ago that humans didn't even know Antarctica existed. And if you wanted to go to the icy continent, you had to spend months on a boat. Stephen Choen from Stellenbosch University said that in one summer, there were so many visitors to Antarctica that they accidentally imported 70,000 alien seeds. The seeds came from lunches, tourist boots, and clinging to the pockets of their jackets. You might think you're clean, but somewhere on your person is probably a tiny seed, and you don't even know it. If Antarctica was a cold and miserable place like you see on TV, this wouldn't be a big deal. But Antarctica isn't as harsh and as desolate as the media would have you believe. Yes, it is cold, but life can still thrive. Many of the alien seeds have already taken root and started to grow. Tourists have accidentally started to terraform Antarctica. This is a story as old as human migration itself. Wherever people go, we spread seeds. We're kind of like birds in that way. The way Stephen Choan and his colleagues found out about the invasion is really interesting. They analyzed 2% of the visitors to Antarctica in a single summer. The 2% equaled 850 people, including tourists and scientists. Stephen took their clothes, their equipment, their shoes, and they vacuumed everything. They found that the scientists were even worse than the tourists for bringing in contraband. Stephen extrapolated the results of the 850 people to get rough figures for everyone who visited. It turns out 7,000 scientists brought 39,000 seeds into the frozen wasteland. Now compare that to 33,000 tourists importing only 32,000 seeds. And the scientists are supposed to know better. Alright, so what plants can you expect to see in Antarctica in a few years growing out of control? Bluegrass for sure, which is already growing on Antarctic islands near the stations in the Western Peninsula, and possibly Japanese knotweed and kudzu vines, because those things can grow anywhere. Antarctica isn't about to be the next Amazon rainforest, but the importation of seeds could change the environment forever. Nobody knows what Antarctica will look like centuries from today, but if you had to guess, do you think it will be more green than white? The Pinnacle man's identity revealed. Something utterly horrifying was uncovered in a cave in January 1977 on the Appalachian Trail. Inside the dark, dripping cavern was the body of a man completely frozen. But he wasn't a caveman from prehistory. He was a modern man who died under very grim circumstances. In 2024, 47 years after the frozen remains were found by hikers in Pennsylvania, a positive identification was made. This is huge news. Authorities have been trying to figure out who this guy was ever since the original incident. They've been calling him the Pinnacle Man this whole time. Now that authorities know his name, it still doesn't make his story any less tragic. It took about 1 hour for officials to positively identify the body of Nicholas Paul Grubb, a 27-year-old man from Fort Washington. A state trooper located his missing fingerprint card in a file, turned it over to the National Missing and Unidentified Person System, and the FBI matched the prints to the Pinnacle Man. Now, the mystery of how Nicholas ended up frozen in a cave has to be solved. In 1977, police did perform an autopsy on the body, thinking perhaps Nicholas had been murdered. But they didn't discover signs of foul play. Instead, they ruled the death a drug overdose. They would have identified the victim right away if not for somebody losing the fingerprint card. It took half a century for that card to turn back up in a file. Jeez, I bet whoever lost the card has been thinking about it ever since. What I can tell you about Nicholas isn't much. He received an honorable discharge from the Pennsylvania Army National Guard in 1971. What he did over the next 6 years is unknown. Even though Nicholas was found in a cave on a trail covered in thick snow, he was wearing thin clothing. He clearly hadn't been anticipating a snowstorm or a long walk in the woods. At the time his body was found, it looked as if he had tried to start a fire inside the cave but failed. It's tragic and horrible, but this is the hard truth. Nicholas didn't just die from the cold. He very much froze to death. He was a human icicle when he was found. Records show that January of 1977 was one of the coldest months in the history of Pennsylvania. There was more than 49 inches of snow that winter. But if he froze to death, why did the police say he died from a drug overdose? George Holmes, the chief deputy coroner at Berks County, said whatever happened is still a massive question mark for police. They don't understand how Nicholas ended up alone in a cave so far from his home. Do you have any theories? Let me know in the comments below. The sea monster with 20 arms. An unknown atrocity, a beast with more arms than an octopus, was found 6,500 feet beneath the cold surface of the Antarctic Sea. In the depths of this frozen landscape is a monster that defies imagination and even scares some scientists. This is a true story, not the premise of an Antarctic horror movie. Between 2008 and 2017, a team of scientists collected specimens of unusual creatures in Antarctic waters. 4 of the samples proved to be completely new species never seen before. One of the species was named Promachocrinus fragarius. It has 20 arms and looks like it came from another dimension. Actually, now that I think about it, it looks a little more like a facehugger from the Alien movies, but with more legs. This creature is something called a crinoid, and although it has 20 legs, it isn't very big. It also isn't particularly dangerous, so that's a relief. Crinoids are related to starfish and sea cucumbers. They sort of drift through the water like leaves on the breeze, their arms flailing around as they search for food. These freaky monsters are actually so dainty when they move through the water that scientists nicknamed them strawberry feather stars. That doesn't have a scary ring to it. The really exciting thing about the discovery is just how many bizarre animals are lurking below the Antarctic ice in frigid waters. If you want to learn more about strange creatures, be sure to subscribe to the channel and check out some of my other videos. The amazing artifacts of lost ancient hikers. Forget that weird wagon thing I mentioned earlier. The Swiss Alps are churning out a treasure trove of bizarre ancient artifacts. These mountains are spitting out secrets faster than you can say Swiss cheese. Archaeologists have been unearthing a mind-boggling array of relics, from the Iron Age through Roman times and deep into the Middle Ages. We're talking about everything from the bones of mules to forgotten weapons, all surfacing as the glaciers shrink. And then there's this, a mysterious Iron Age statuette pulled from a melting glacier, thanks to Morgan McFall Johnson. Scientists are stumped. It's clearly a wooden figure, but who or what it represents is anyone's guess. The armless statue was discovered by a mountaineer in 1999, soaking in a puddle of meltwater. Now, that's not exactly how you'd expect to find a 2,000-year-old artifact. The mountaineer, bless their adventurous and slightly eccentric soul, cleaned it with some household chemicals and then proudly displayed it on their wall for the next 20 years. Finally, in 2018, the statuette was graciously donated to museum curator Pierre-Yves Nicode. Nicode, who works at the Valais History Museum, a fortress perched dramatically on a mountaintop overlooking the town of Valais, is at the forefront of glacial archaeology. This isn't your average museum. Think of it as the coolest archaeological icebox on Earth, brimming with treasures plucked from the frozen depths. Take these intriguing sticks, for example. Found scattered across high mountain passes, these aren't your ordinary twigs. They were discovered above the tree line, meaning they didn't simply grow there. Someone, somewhere, deliberately brought them to these remote locations. Some believe they date back to Roman times, when the Romans, like wealthy tourists on a Himalayan expedition, relied on local Celtic guides to navigate the treacherous mountain passes. The Celts, their Sherpas in this ancient drama, may have used these sticks as trail markers, leaving a cryptic breadcrumb trail across the icy landscape. But maybe we're overthinking it. Perhaps these sticks were simply souvenirs, tokens of a long, arduous journey. Imagine trekking through these mountains for weeks on end. Wouldn't you want a cool stick to keep you company and help you walk? It's not like they could pop down to the local pub for a hot chocolate and a quick ski break. The Valais Museum also houses the chilling remains of a wealthy 17th century traveler whose alpine adventure took a tragic turn. Shoes, bones, utensils, a jumble of coins, a dagger, and even a sword. This guy was clearly prepared for anything. He was found in a crevasse, a grim reminder of the dangers that lurked beneath the icy surface. No satellite phones back then, folks. Just a long, cold, and incredibly claustrophobic demise. And probably a whole lot of regret about not packing more snacks. The quality of his clothing and the variety of coins from northern Italy suggests he was a man of means. The presence of a German-made sword hinted at the dangers he might have faced, perhaps from mountain bandits. And the discovery of 2 mule skeletons nearby paints a picture of a merchant traveling through the mountains, perhaps with valuable cargo. This is just one of the many mysteries unearthed from the melting glaciers of the Alps. Who knows what other secrets these icy tombs hold? The adventure continues. The cold truth of frozen pestilence. Viruses frozen for centuries, thawed and released into the world to cause a pandemic of devastating proportions. This is a very real possibility if scientists aren't careful. As more ancient mysteries are revealed from the ice, the chance of releasing terror into the world increases. When archaeologists find something interesting in the ice, they have to be very careful to wash their hands, especially when they touch the wet and chilly remains of people and animals. You should always wash your hands when touching things that have been dead for centuries, or just dead in general. But in this case, it's doubly important because thawed biological organisms are notorious for carrying viruses and microbes, things that are still contagious because they were preserved in the cold. It's like a freezer full of zombie viruses just waiting for the right moment to strike back. One of the scariest viruses that researchers worry about is one you might be familiar with. It's one I really hope never makes a big comeback because the first time around, it almost wiped out half of Europe. I'm of course talking about the Black Death. Remember the relics I just told you about a minute ago that have been found in the Swiss Alps? Some of them date to the Middle Ages at the peak of the Black Death. Don't worry though, no one at the Valley Museum has been infected yet by any ancient microbes. In 2016, thawing permafrost in Russia's Arctic region released anthrax that had been trapped beneath the ice for a very long time. Dozens of people were infected and one child died from the outbreak. And things could get worse. In the Tibetan Plateau, a team of scientists recently drilled into the ice of the Gulia Glacier to collect core samples. Some of the samples are 41,000 years old. Scientists divided them into small sections and started extracting DNA. Throughout this process, scientists identified over 1,700 species of virus. These were viruses that came and went over a span of thousands of years. And they are very different from modern warm viruses floating around today. None of the viruses in Tibet pose a threat to humanity, at least not that scientists know about, but who's to say the next one won't take out 1 billion people when an infected scientist boards a plane? Why is Siberia exploding? As if viruses escaping the Siberian permafrost weren't terrifying enough, in some places the ground is literally exploding. Would you rather catch the plague or be standing on a natural landmine when it goes off? Random craters are forming from natural explosions in the Siberian taiga, and scientists have been struggling to figure out why for years. Here's what a Siberian hole looks like. Imagine tripping and falling into that thing. You'd be screaming, "Help!" all the way to the center of the Earth. The view is of a crater that appeared in the summer of 2014 on the Yamal Peninsula. It's only one of a couple dozen. How would you like to tumble into that black pit of doom? Or even worse, be standing at that very spot when the explosion happened? These craters mostly form in the summer when the ice is totally gone. A few were even found in August 2024. That's pretty recently. Scientists have come up with a different hypothesis to make sense of the phenomenon. Some have said aliens, and some have blamed the holes on meteor strikes. But the most widely accepted scientific explanation is gas. The Siberian Arctic is a very gassy piece of land. Underneath the tundra, methane has been building for countless millennia, but it's been kept safely stored because of the ice at the surface. With the global temperature rising across the planet, gases previously trapped are escaping. And when they do, they escape with violent force. Gas pushes its way up, forming those little bubbles at the surface, like pimples. Those pimples swell with methane until the ground can't take it anymore and they burst. I hope nobody just had a flashback to being a pimply teenager. Although this is the most widely accepted theory, scientists still can't agree on the mechanisms behind how the pressure builds in the first place. They basically don't know where the gas is coming from. I want you to keep in mind that some of these craters are huge, several hundred feet in diameter, and so deep you can't see the bottom from the top. They're big enough that researchers have to spelunk down into them like exploring a vast underground cavern. For now, craters are going to keep emerging in Russia. Locals just have to hope that they're lucky enough not to be standing on one of the earthy blisters before it pops. Just stay tuned for the next thrilling episode of Glacier Archaeology Gone Wild. Thanks for watching! What amazing frozen discovery did you find the most exciting? What do you want to hear more about?
Be sure to stay tuned for extra content you might have missed.
Frozen mummies. At the edge of the Arctic, mummified members of an unknown civilization were recently dug out of the permafrost. This amazing discovery happened at the burial site of Zeleny Yar, which was once a necropolis used by very early humans living in Siberia. According to Alexander Gusev, the researcher who led the expedition, they discovered the mummified remains of an adult and a baby all wrapped up, lying next to one another. The bodies had been cocooned in copper, fur, and bark, buried with their feet facing the river. Someone had taken great care to bundle up the bodies tightly in thick fabric, then wrapped them in layers and layers of birch bark. The adult, once fully wrapped in their cocoon, was covered from the tip of their toes to the top of their head with copper plates. As for the baby, it was only covered in small copper fragments, but there were also some other artifacts that archaeologists can't really see yet. The team removed the mummies along with as much soil and dirt as possible so they could protect it, and then study everything later in more detail. The archaeologists were so shocked by the amazing preservation of the adult mummy that they haven't even risked opening the cocoon yet. It's now being preserved at a laboratory in Russia, waiting for scientists to perform some non-intrusive analysis to discover more about this ancient people. The frozen scarecrow. Back in 1939, the Soviets wanted the Finns to move their border over a few miles, handing over the land to the USSR so that they could construct a naval base and create a buffer zone around the city of Leningrad. The Finnish people refused to move their border, resulting in what we know of today as the Winter War. Almost immediately, the Soviets began massing troops along the border of Finland. It was pretty brutal, seeing as Finland had around 3 million people, while the Soviet Union had around 171 million people. In a bizarre attempt to keep their borders secure, Finnish soldiers started taking the frozen corpses of Soviet soldiers and mounting them on sticks like scarecrows. The Soviets were shocked to come across bodies completely frozen in the snow, hard as stone, sticking up, making everything quite creepy. It was minus 22 degrees Fahrenheit during the Winter War, so soldiers often dropped dead of hypothermia rather than bullet wounds. The Finnish people then used these frozen bodies and would pose them to intimidate their Soviet enemies. The bodies were all taken down after the war, but there are still some disturbing photos of ice scarecrows floating around as a reminder of those terrifying dark days. Zombie plants. Frozen zombie plants from the last miniature ice age have just been revived after spending 400 years encased in ice. In an unprecedented act of science, experts managed to recover the frozen plants from melting Canadian glaciers and were actually able to bring them back to life. The scientists involved in the study referred to the structural preservation of these plants as exceptional. In the laboratory, they were able to grow them as if nothing had happened. What? I can barely keep a houseplant alive. Scientists now know that some plants are significantly tougher than previously thought, clearly, able to bounce back even after spending centuries entombed in ice. The resurrected plants were taken from the Teardrop Glacier, located in the northern territory of Nunavut. This particular glacier has been melting at an alarmingly fast rate, at over 12 feet each year. Thanks to the rapid melting, plants that were frozen hundreds of years ago are suddenly being revealed. Researchers from the University of Alberta were exploring the glacier when they stumbled upon the black remains of what they thought were dead plants. So they stuck them in buckets and took them home. The scientists managed to date the plants back to around the year 1550 AD, when the world experienced a brief ice age that lasted for 300 years. Brief in terms of world history, but kind of long given our lifespan. Scientists can't exactly say what this discovery means for humankind as a whole. All they know is that when it comes to plants, even being frozen for hundreds of years can't stop their growth. Probably a good reason to freeze some seeds in case the apocalypse comes. Ancient bison stew. During the last ice age, a special breed of bison roamed from what is today Spain across Europe and Russia into China and beyond to Canada. It hung out with ancient horses, the woolly rhinoceros, and even the woolly mammoth. In fact, the ancient steppe bison is one of the oldest animals ever drawn by humans, found in prehistoric caves throughout Europe. But unfortunately, the bison went extinct roughly 8,000 years ago. In its absence, the American bison became the most prevalent of its kind throughout North America. North of Fairbanks in Alaska during the gold rush back in 1976, a family of miners discovered the immaculately preserved carcass of one of these extinct bison. It was the corpse of a large male encased in a block of ice. The creature was gigantic, dated to be 36,000 years old, and he was also blue. The family named the prehistoric beast Blue Babe after Paul Bunyan's mythical companion. They realized the specimen was unique, so they got a hold of a paleontologist from the University of Alaska named Dale Guthrie. Dale and his team then melted the layer of ice around the dead bison and performed an in-depth analysis. So, why was he blue? When the bison started to decompose, the animal tissue reacted with iron in the soil, creating a coat of white vivianite. When it was exposed to the air, it turned into a brilliant shade of blue. What they discovered is that the bison was probably killed by another extinct animal from the Ice Age, a prehistoric lion. The attack probably went down in winter, so the bison's remains were frozen solid. The team managed to bring the dead bison back to the University of Alaska Museum and preserve it for generations to come. But in 1984, right before the specimen went on exhibit, they did something a little strange. Dale extracted a bit of meat from the bison's neck and used it to make a stew. This bizarre experiment turned out to be quite enlightening. Nobody got sick from the stew. Everyone who ate it said the bison meat tasted just like ordinary beef. And thanks to the brave diners, we now know that frozen meat is still edible 36,000 years later. If given the chance, would you dare eat bison stew made from 36,000-year-old meat? Let me know what you think in the comments below. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you are new here. I want to give a big shout out to Adam Shiflett and Chris Hadwin. Thanks so much for supporting this channel. We wouldn't be here without you. Ancient puppy. Speaking of frozen critters, an ancient puppy was recently discovered frozen in the Siberian permafrost. The puppy dates back 18,000 years and seems to be an ancestor of both wolves and dogs. DNA tests have been inconclusive, with experts not able to determine whether the small canine was a wild beast or a domesticated friend, but it might play a very important role in understanding who were the first people to domesticate dogs and where our best friends come from. The puppy's name is Dogor, and it was found by locals in the frigid Siberian wasteland in 2018. Thanks to the unusually warm winter, the puppy had emerged from the ice so amazingly preserved that it still had its teeth, its whiskers, its eyelashes, and all of its internal organs. Researchers were able to figure out that the animal was only 2 months old at the time of its death, though they can't say why it died. The DNA was sequenced by the best in the world at the Center for Paleogenetics in Sweden. The DNA told them that the dog was a male, somewhere along the evolutionary track between a wild wolf and a domesticated dog that could be a common canine ancestor, or even an extinct kind of wolf that died during the Ice Age. Glacier Plain. A heat wave recently unveiled a lost warplane from the Second World War that was hidden beneath the ice for 72 years. The warplane was a United States military transport aircraft flying from Austria to Italy back in 1946. But before it could ever make it to its destination, a snowstorm forced the aircraft to make a crash landing in the Bernese Alps. The 12 servicemen on board were rescued by Swiss soldiers after spending 5 days trapped on the frozen mountain. However, the C-53 Skytrooper, also known as a Dakota, was beyond rescue. They had no choice but to leave it on the mountain, and in the following years, the airplane was buried under layers of snow and ice and forgotten. In August 2018, temperatures in the Swiss Alps soared and caused a lot of places to melt for the first time in many years. The unusually warm weather up in the mountains finally revealed the plane. Investigators discovered tin cans, old spoons, and all kinds of ordinary items inside the crashed plane. Mysterious frozen caveman. A bizarre caveman stuck in what looks like a block of ice was recently discovered along a trail in a Minneapolis park. The mysterious caveman sculpture has been confusing local hikers who find it along their path. It's been compared to the mysterious Utah monument found last November, since nobody knew where it came from or who put it there. It's obviously not an alien monolith dropped from space, but it is highly unusual. The first people to find the frozen caveman quickly realized that it wasn't actually trapped in a block of ice, but instead secured inside a brick of plastic. The caveman inside is actually a sculpture of a Neanderthal. After a bit of mystery and online speculation, the maker of the frozen caveman came forward to claim it as his own creation. He's an artist named Zach Schumacher. Zach told local TV news that he wanted to make something people could have fun with in the great outdoors that didn't involve their phone or the internet. He hoped the unusual sight would encourage people to go out, explore the parks, and check out the trails. Did it work? Do you want to go hiking now? Let me know in the comments below. Lost bodies. The owner of a Swiss ski resort was shocked when his workers came across a small collection of bodies that had been frozen in the ice for 75 years. This time they weren't sculptures, but actual real people. Employees of Switzerland's Glacier 3000 ski resort were out doing maintenance near the ski lifts when one of them noticed a large black rock that he thought looked a little out of place. As it turned out, it was extremely out of place. It also wasn't a rock. When he took a closer look, he realized he was staring at a dead body sticking out of the ice. Not just one body either, there were two of them. They belonged to Marcelin and Francine Dumoulin, who went missing almost a century ago. Amazingly, the crew at the ski resort knew immediately who the dead people were. The missing couple had been a legend at the ski resort ever since they mysteriously vanished without a trace. Nobody knew what happened to them back then, but they were assumed to be dead and gone. The couple had owned a farm and went missing while exploring the area. It was in August of 1942, and their family searched for them for over 2 months. But by the time winter showed up, the weather was so terrible that they had to give up. The couple left behind 7 children. Today, 2 of those kids are still alive. To finally know what happened to their parents has been a huge blessing. Since the discovery, the bodies, which honestly weren't much more than blackened bones at this point, were excavated from the mountain and given proper burials. Primeval Lake. A primeval lake has been discovered buried underneath about a mile of ice in Greenland. Scientists say this mysterious buried lake could hold secrets to the ancient climate of Greenland. The lake formed at a time when Greenland wasn't covered in even a scrap of ice. This was several million years ago, but because Greenland's ice is rapidly melting, the lake could once again be filled with water in the next handful of years. According to Guy Paxman from Columbia University, the landscape of Greenland is currently concealed and inaccessible, but with the new discovery of the lake, scientists have a rough idea of what the huge plot of land will look like once all the ice is gone yet again. Guy Paxman and his team discovered the lake in the first place thanks to radar technology, which is able to penetrate the icy surface and read the topography below. The lake is approximately 1.1 miles below the surface and stretches 2,700 square miles. It's roughly the size of Delaware and Rhode Island squished together. At its deepest point, the lake extends 800 feet down. Entombed in ice. A tragic and shocking discovery was recently made in Russia after an extremely atrocious spout of winter weather, including freezing rain. A homeless man was on his way to the local cathedral when heavy rain and icy winds came out of nowhere. Everyone who could run inside did, but the homeless man was out of luck. He got stuck in the storm and was not found until much later, literally encased in a tomb of ice. The local people were shocked to discover the guy in the middle of the street, still wearing his mask for COVID-19, solid as an ice sculpture. They believe he was running to escape the storm but slowly turned into an icicle. He probably fell down, couldn't get up, and just kind of slowly froze to death. But believe it or not, this was not the first time such an incident has occurred. The caretaker of the cathedral, which the homeless man was trying to seek shelter in, told the Siberian Times that the year before, 5 people suffered similar fates. They were all vagrants found in the local park after being frozen solid by ice cyclones. This insanity seems to be happening every year in the Siberian city of Vladivostok, where it evidently gets so cold that you can freeze solid just trying to walk down the street. What's the craziest thing you've ever seen discovered in ice? Let me know in the comments below, and thanks for watching! If you haven't already, be sure to hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you next time. Bye!